Welcome to the Elijah Rising podcast. Elijah Rising is an organization empowering women recovering from sexual exploitation. This episode is going to help you become more aware about the issue of sex trafficking and inspire you to take action.
Hey, if you haven't already, go ahead and like and subscribe to this podcast so that more people can enjoy this content. And on today's podcast, I am joined by the one and only Chelsie Lancaster, my friend, my colleague, and I am so excited to have her on the podcast today. Chelsie is the manager of the Elijah Rising Social Enterprise. Welcome, Chelsie.
Thanks, Adam. It's good to be here. Thanks for opening up this space.
Absolutely. Yeah. And thanks for saying yes. Thanks for being here today. It's Chelsea's first time on the podcast. And so we're really excited about that because today on the Elijah Rising podcast, we're going to discuss common misconceptions about those who have overcome sex trafficking. But before we kind of get into that, why don't you, Chelsie, tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and about your work here at Elijah Rising.
Yeah, thanks. So my name's Chelsie. I am a single mom to an amazing 5-year-old. I also help run the social enterprise, and most importantly, I am an overcomer of trafficking myself. So I came out almost 6 years ago, and it has been quite a journey.
Yeah. So what do you do at Elijah Rising here? What does it mean to be the social enterprise manager?
Yeah, it requires wearing a lot of hats.
Yeah.
My boss, Sam, is amazing, but I also get to work with the women that are healing in our program. And so on days that they're not here, it looks like doing a million things that nobody would think about.
Yeah, sure.
And on the days that they are here, it's really about serving them so that they can succeed at what they're doing. So it's really a support. My role is a support for them. Yeah,
and you know, I think it's so cool because you bring a certain perspective to this conversation, and I mean to this specific conversation, but really like to the whole work of anti-trafficking space and movement, if that's what we are, a movement, because you not only have like lived experience yourself, but day to day you're working with those who have lived experience, and then you're like living experience with them as they're going through their journey of healing and restoration, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
So you really, your expertise, I think, is just invaluable, which is why I'm so happy that we're talking today. So let's talk about some of those common misconceptions that people have about overcomers, about survivors. And so that's kind of where I want to start is terminology. Victim, survivor, overcomer, these terms are thrown around, and even within our space and within, interagency dialogue, there's some debate over, well, what's the proper way to refer to people, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So I just want to hear, like, just from a basic level, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Number one thing I would say is that the terminology we use in the movement per se is very foreign to the outside world, and especially to women and men in those situations.
Yeah.
And so the first time I ever heard the term overcomer was by Kathy Givens, who was recently on the podcast.
Friend of the podcast, absolutely.
Yes. And I have so much respect for Kathy. And when she said that, it was the first time I really felt like there was a term put to our experiences that was truly empowering, because if you think about it, every person, even women, men and children that are still currently in those situations, are literally surviving every single day.
Yeah.
And so I don't feel like survivor really encompasses what it means to break out of that lifestyle and out of that way of life for people. Yeah.
I mean, you've kind of, in previous conversations, as we've talked about things like this, you've kind of, an analogy that you've used at a previous conversation was you kind of linked it to like people who are working through, a medical condition or even like cancer, like they are surviving.
Right.
But maybe help the audience understand kind of what you mean by that analogy.
Yeah, it's, I feel like a lot of times that as a movement trying to put words to the issue.
Yeah.
We put it in terms of things we maybe can comprehend. And so whenever I hear the word survivor, I'm like, survivor of what? Because like you said, there's cancer survivors, there's war survivors, there's any kind of survivor under the sun. And so for us, when we can claim a word that we feel like empowers us and really talks about what our lives are now, rather than what we've been through, that's what we want.
Yeah. It's about what's happened now, which is overcoming.
Right. And too many times, the trauma that we've been through are what people really want to know about. But I can tell you that what we've done after the fact is so much more incredible.
Yeah.
And we have literally broken through obstacles and barriers that other people would have given up in the pursuit of a better life. And so when I think of overcomer, for me personally, that's what I prefer. Because most definitely I'm overcoming, like every single day.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I think it's also like a subtle indication that's like the traumatic situation, which is very real and should be taken into consideration. And we need trauma-informed people in this space, but it's like, it's not what defines you.
It's not at all. I would say that's the least interesting thing about me.
Wow.
And almost pretty much every woman that I've met. Is that, hey, if you got to know the rest of us, you would be blown away.
Yeah. I can totally agree with those overcomers that I have friendships with, and yourself included. It's like I can, just from a personal perspective, I can completely attest to the fact that what you're saying is true. And so let's talk a little bit about. I kind of mentioned it at the beginning. You did too. Like, you have all this experience, all this lived experience, and you're working with women, and you're getting to know women that are in the life, that have already exited the life. They're at various stages in this kind of journey. So what do you think, and this is going to be a real open-ended question, but like, what do you think people would be shocked to know about these women? And if you think of some in your head, like those that are still, in the life and still trying to figure that out, and those who have already come out.
Yeah, I think this is such an important question to ask, and one that's not asked enough, about what really is a survivor. And I would say every person that I've met is exceptional in so many ways, whether it's in their giftings or talents, or even in the way that their mind can operate and really like juggle things and multitask, like what you have to do to be able to like come out of those situations requires a unique set of skills and abilities that I don't find in the normal everyday population. And so that would be the first thing I say is these are exceptional people. These are exceptional people. And not only that, a lot of times people think because of what we've been through that we don't have anybody that wants us. And so therefore it's up to organizations to be the answer for that.
Right.
And I will say that more often than not, women have children. They have families that depend on them.
Yeah, great point.
And they are an important part of their community in one way or another, but they're not like forgotten, abandoned. It does happen, but more often than not, probably 90% of the women I've met, that's not the case. And so, I think the perception of what a survivor is needs to dramatically shift and change. Because the way that we have been viewing it is actually pretty disabling as somebody that knows what they need and can tell you what they need, and then assumptions are made about what that looks like, and we kind of feel like a lot of times at the mercy of other people in our healing journey. And the last thing I'll say about that, about how we're viewed, is that it feels like, I guess, in the almost 6 years that I've been out of everything, it feels like that there is this perception that we are incapable of doing things for ourselves, of making decisions, of there's a lot of ways that, for instance, if you look at like a war veteran and they walk into a room and you find out they're a veteran, there is a place of honor.
Yeah.
There is a place of amazement of what they've been through.
Yeah.
And when you walk in the room and are labeled a survivor, there's pity.
Yeah. Oh, poor girl.
Poor girl.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so horrible.
Yeah.
And as a 34-year-old woman, when I'm, say that I have a college degree, I have a bachelor's degree.
Yeah. Red Raider.
And yes. And people are literally stunned.
Yeah.
And what other 34-year-old
would you be surprised?
would you be surprised and not even expect like a master's or a doctorate from?
Yeah.
And so that it's almost like we have to work our way up to even be at other people's starting point as adults.
Yeah. Yeah, it is, one of the things that I do, because I know about my work, obviously, but, for the audience, one of the things that I do is I'm often in these rooms full of people who are very well-meaning, concerned citizens who want to do something about this injustice that we can all agree it's a bad deal. But there is sometimes this perception that like those who are experiencing the exploitation, even it's an unconscious thing, I think, for some people. That's like, it is a second-class citizen type deal where it's like, oh, these people who are being trafficked, oh my gosh, we have to do everything for them now because they're just too broken to advocate for themselves or too broken to like pull themselves out of their situation or to even find healing on their own, right? And so then but when you do that, when that becomes your kind of default mindset, you see the problem not as like individual, unique human beings, which everyone is a unique human being no matter what they've been through, but like you create this category of people in your brain and then you hold them like that, right? To where you might end up in a room with somebody and they're like, what, you have a college degree? How is that even possible? It's like, well, I went to school just like any other person, right? And so I just appreciate so much that you're shedding light on that misconception, because I think it does shock people. And that's not okay, which is what I hear you saying. So maybe kind of the next place I want to go in the conversation is, how do people in the life and out of the life relate to one another? Like, is there a sense of community, a sense of connectedness, or is it just like a competitiveness because you're having to kind of compete on the street? Or kind of what's your perception of that?
Yeah, that's a good question as well. I think it depends on the space and sphere that you're in.
Sure, yeah.
On the street, even in the clubs, there can be that. And I think it's a lot of times, it's not because we don't care about each other, but it's because you're trying to cover your back. You're trying to do what's in your best interest.
Sure. Right.
But more oftentimes than not, there is a sense of camaraderie and an instant like bond that somebody knows that you understand in a sense where they have been.
Sure.
And so I found that it actually creates more space and more of a connection because we understand each other than it does this rivalry. And, really, I think even in the movement, you can see that like sense of rivalry that like, oh, but more often than not, like we're cheering each other on.
Yeah.
And I say that because that's what I've seen, even on the street. Like we had, there was a girl that had gone home to another state to visit family, and she was killed by a client and her body dumped on the street. And when I went on outreach, the women out there had put up a memorial.
Right.
We're constantly bringing things in honor of her, and all they talked about was her.
Yeah.
And so I think what that is that you see yourself so much in the other person. Like every single one of them knew that could be their reality and that could happen to them.
Yeah.
And that's where I really saw, like, there is unity, even on the street, even in the clubs, because it's like a sibling, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, you may fight with them.
That's a great analogy.
Like, day and night. But if somebody comes after them, you're going to fight for them.
Right.
And so that's the same thing that I see in my community.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes so much sense. It's like, I think the sibling analogy works so well. It's like, I will fight you right now, but if somebody else comes for you, I got your back 100%, 1,000%.
Yeah.
You know, we're going to take a break in the podcast. And when we come back, we're going to continue our conversation with Chelsie. So we'll see you on the other side of the break. Take a second and think about how many subscription services you have. Netflix, Hulu, Spotify. If you're like me, you have more than you actually use. That money just disappears out of your bank account, or maybe you don't even use the product anymore. So why not donate that same amount of money to Elijah Rising and know that every dollar you spend directly serves those who are overcoming sex trafficking? We invite you to join The Rise. The Rise is a dedicated community of recurring donors who give strategically to fund the work of ending sex trafficking. Join our community of more than 200 members who have decided to rise up. $10 a month can provide services for women seeking to exit exploitation. $40 a month can provide job training and employment for an overcomer of trafficking. Donate online via credit card, debit, ACH, or Apple and Google Pay at ElijahRising.org/rise. Hey, welcome back. Chelsie, let's talk about the media. Okay, let's go there. You know, trafficking is in the news a lot these days. It seems like it's becoming more and more popular to, you know, even on social media, people are sharing stuff all the time. Sometimes not in a helpful way, right? But it's just like in the common conversation these days in this country, which again I think that's a good thing, but also a really bad thing in some cases. But the media grabs hold of it, right? And I know, just because we know each other well, like you have experience sharing your story with the media in a few different places and spaces. So what's your perspective on the media's role in serving survivors and their stories? Yeah,
it has been interesting working with the media. I have had some decent experiences, and then I've had some horrible experiences.
Yeah.
None of them have been great.
None are great. Okay.
Which should tell you everything you really need to know.
It kind of does, doesn't it? Yeah.
And even the question, what is the media's role in serving survivors? From my experience, it has really been survivors having to serve the media.
Oh, wow.
And so if you're the one dictating how the story is going to go, if you are presenting the story one way when you get somebody to sign on and then do something completely different, it's for ratings, it's for post, it's for the hype, it's really about your name.
It's for the money too,
it's
right?
It's for the money, it's every reason under the sun except for us. And so I really think that this is an area that needs to be transformed and changed, because if you don't have survivors, even in media, dictating what the story is going to be and how we're going to go about doing that, how can you effectively, like, even represent our voices?
Well, it's a different form of exploitation.
100%. 100%. And I just even... We talk about trauma-informed a lot.
Yeah.
I would really like to even see that shifted to how would you feel if an entire movement was, you know, sharing your stories, sharing your experiences at the expense of you being re-traumatized to further their cause.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
that's my take on it.
Yeah, it's a tough place to be in for sure. And there just has to be better. We just have to do better. I guess maybe that's the
100%.
final word, is just do better and listen. I think one of the things that I'm so struck with these days is like, if we're not actually listening to the overcomers tell us what is working and not working, then we're not, you put it well, then we're not actually serving overcomers. We're serving our bottom, our agenda, our bottom line, our notoriety, whatever the case may be. And so it's so important to know people. And I guess, man, let me just get on a soapbox for a second here. Like you need to have, like if you're in this work, you have to be listening to people who have lived it and who have come out of it, like yourself. And there are tons of others, right? I mean, again, Kathy is kind of the famous name in Houston, but there's tons of others. There's hundreds of others. There's thousands of others that you can find overcomers to sit down and have coffee with and be like, hey, are we doing this? Are we serving you, or are we off base here, right? And so it's so necessary. Sorry, not trying to take over the podcast. It just felt like...
No, I completely agree. And I'll say that as even just being around everything for the last, several years, almost every woman that has come out of those experiences, like especially at the beginning, wanted so badly to be a part of the change and wanted so badly, and we're exhausted.
Yeah.
And so, the lack of representation for us is really disheartening. And it's almost like, well, you guys just go do your own thing, because it's not really about us.
Yeah. It's important to hear that, Chelsie.
Yeah.
So this next question is a really big question, and I readily admit that it is probably impossible to fully answer, but I'm going to throw it at you anyways.
Do it. Bring it.
So what are some ways, in your experience, that social political structures are enforcing some of these misconceptions that we've been talking about today?
Yeah, that's a good one too. I have, in my healing journey, I have overcome and encountered more obstacles than I could even fit in a day.
Yeah.
And it has made it so much harder to get where I'm at.
Yeah.
One experience I had recently, I went to go and donate plasma. And one of the first questions they ask is, in the last 12 months, have you ever received money or drugs or gifts in exchange for sex since 1977?
Wow.
That tells me that I'm considered damaged goods, even in the sense of like helping people.
Even if it's been a year ago,
even if it's
or longer, or whatever.
Longer, even if it's 6 years, 20 years, 30 years.
Yeah.
I'm never going to be able to help in that way, help people in that way. But also a follow-up question is, in the last 12 months, have you had sex with somebody that has ever received money or drugs in exchange for sex? So that tells me that a buyer can wait 12 months after he's had sex with a prostituted woman. But I never can donate again. So that it's the value system, right?
Yeah.
It's that we're considered less than, even in trying to help people.
Yeah.
And so that's really, that's frustrating. It's something that I come up against, things like that. It's like whenever my people wrote fraudulent checks in my name during my experience, and I called to get my name cleared. They told me I would have to wait 5 years unless I had a police report.
Wow.
And to open up a bank account. And so how do you function in life?
Yeah.
How do you do things with things even on your record? Like every single turn and twist, there have been obstacles that other people don't encounter.
Yeah. Yeah. And the like giving plasma thing is so crazy to me. It's like there's a standard of like, 1970 whatever, like
Yes.
you weren't even you're not even that old.
I wasn't even alive
So
then.
literally
No.
your entire life,
Yeah.
kind of going back to the first question we asked at the beginning of the podcast, like your entire life is defined by your experience, but the buyer who was engaged in the exact same act only has to wait 12 months.
Yeah, the buyer.
Which that's just crazy.
Yeah. And the buyer who actually like is one of the driving forces behind my trauma.
Yeah, they're the one who, yeah, right.
Like, can't even.
Yeah.
I will say that in political social structures that we need drastic changes all the way from laws that are being made. Like every single step of the way in this movement should be dictated by overcomers.
Yeah.
And I say that because if you go assuming that you know how to go about things, you're going to miss it. Like you're going to miss some really important things that are actually really, really simple. Kathy said it best. Like it's actually really simple to help somebody who has been through what we've been through.
Yeah.
We overcomplicate it.
Right.
But it's actually incredibly simple.
Yeah.
And so even in that realm, I've been a part of helping laws get passed.
Yeah,
and,
that's right.
You know, there's still like, we're in it for the photo op a lot of times.
Yeah, for sure.
It's not about it. It's still not about us, those laws that are being passed.
Right.
They want us for a photo op. And
Right.
so if that the driving force isn't that overcome, because we can get stuff done.
Yeah.
We will go to extensive links for our people.
Yeah.
And for ourselves even. Like I'm fighting for myself that was 6 years ago when I was going through everything.
Absolutely. Yeah. 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 And I see you every day, almost every day. And I see the fight that you keep up. And,
For sure.
And it is, and I know, and I can attest to the fact that it's not just for Chelsie. It is for all of those women in the life, out of the life, all of it. I see it every day. So you're on staff at a nonprofit.
Correct.
Right. And so how can nonprofits like Elijah Rising, but there are tons of them out there, right? We have, our partners listen, and I know that they're following some of the work that we do. So how can nonprofits like ours and even churches or other just like collections of concerned, well-meaning citizens do a better job of supporting overcomers? I'm
going to give one step.
Okay.
Because it's the most overlooked step in the entire movement.
Yeah.
If you are not, I want to repeat again, this is like the third time. If you do not like echo the voices of women like me, of overcomers, of people that have lived through it, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
And I don't even have to look at what you're doing to tell you it's wrong.
Yeah.
And like literally the way to fix that, stop everything you're doing and do that first.
Yeah.
And let that, here's the deal. I don't want to just stand in front of a crowd to speak because it's like if my voice doesn't facilitate real change, if you're not willing to change according to the input advice that you see, then the values they're misaligned.
Right.
And like you said, I do this for myself, my daughter, but I do this for my people.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's a lot easier to not be labeled as a survivor and not to even come into the conversation because of how disabling it can be. But that's what I would say. Yeah. And you know what? Better yet, pay them like you would any other consultant for your business, for your organization, like as well. Like however much you're going to pay an accounting consultant, pay them that because their experience is more invaluable than anything anybody can learn from school. Yeah. And we paid dearly for that.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. The experience that you have is not learned in a classroom.
No.
Which, we're all good with, go get a degree, right? You have a degree, I've got a degree, we've all got degrees, right? But what you are saying is like no school can teach you the lived experience that an overcomer will have.
100%.
And so if your goal is to serve overcomers, there has to be connected.
If you aren't asking, like literally, I'll break it down. If you're not asking me how you can help me, and listening to that and literally shaping what you do based on that.
Yeah.
Or if of other overcomer or other survivors, other people.
Sure.
Like, if you are not asking the people that you are helping, what are you doing?
Yeah. And I just think it's worth mentioning again, Chelsea, that like there are tons of like you're available. And right,
Yes.
I mean, there are tons of overcomers, especially if you're a viewer or a listener in the Houston area. Like there are a plethora that you can, and
so many,
some of whom you've heard
so
on this
many.
podcast, and we can connect you. And then especially if you're in the work like us, and you're serving clients in a restorative care program or even on outreach, right? Like you listen to them say what works and what doesn't work.
Yes.
Chelsea,
Yes.
I want to thank you for your voice. I want to thank you for your friendship, for your time here today and doing this with us. And so I just wonder if there's anything else we haven't covered or anything you kind of want to hype up or promote. We've also got some great smelling candles around here that you might have something to do with.
Yes, I definitely do. First and foremost, I want to tell any woman that's either experiencing exploitation or has experienced exploitation or even at risk. Contact 1211 Partners, Kathy Givens. That girl is the real deal. She is doing it. She is not hype. She is 100% doing more than you will ever know that she's doing. Buy our candles. I work with the women that help make them every day, and they are incredible individuals. And we love doing it. So if you want a gift, like definitely Elijah Rising Goods is great. Connect with survivors. Connect. We literally just are asking, like we're waiting on people to even invite us just to the conversation.
Sure.
So organizations connect with the survivor. Like treat them as good as or better than you would treat somebody else that you invite into a conversation. And I guess last but not least, I do, while I work for Elijah Rising today, I'm a voice for myself and my people. Because you can always change like your job, you can always change your occupation, but I can never change the experiences that shaped me into who I am today. And I wouldn't want to because I get to then, like you said, fight for others. So thanks so much for having me. It's been great.
Shop.elijahrising.org. You can we make incredible products. Chelsea makes incredible products, and they can be shipped directly to your home anywhere in the country.
Free shipping over $25.
There you go.
And like I said, the women are part of the creative process.
That's
they
right.
are part of. We include them in so much because they own like the products they make. They really love what they do,
and they're getting paid a fair wage, right? And so they earn their money for the work that they do, and we are proud of that fact. We are proud of that fact, especially that they're in the creative process as well. So hit us up, find us, buy the products, support Chelsea, support the work that the social enterprise is doing, and we will see you on the next episode of the Elijah Rising podcast. Thanks for watching.
Thank you for joining us today for this episode. If you were inspired by this content today, please share, rate, and leave a review. Also, please consider making a donation at elijahrising.org/donate. Your support helps us continue the vital mission to combat sex trafficking. Until next time.